So guys, I've been seeing this Gardner-Johnson story everywhere this week, and I had to talk about it because look, this is a guy who earned a Super Bowl ring with Philadelphia, who was a real piece of that championship defense, and he's now out here taking shots at the very roster that won him that ring. He sat down for an interview, and he didn't just vent about how things ended for him. He went after one specific name still on that Eagles roster, a guy their fan base loves. And the way he said it is the kind of line that's going to follow him around for a while. So stick around, because I'm going to break down exactly what he said, why he's already on his 7th team in 8 seasons, and why nobody around the league is really shocked he's talking like this again. What's up, Birds gang? Welcome to NFL Playbook Eagles. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, CJ Gardner-Johnson is a name that should mean something to anybody who watched this defense the last few years. This guy came over from the Saints back in August of 2022, 4th-round pick out of Florida, and honestly, nobody really expected what happened next. That first season here, he was an absolute menace on the back end, led the entire league in interceptions, and he did that while missing 5 games with a kidney injury, which is wild when you sit and think about it. He's out there for basically 2/3 of a season and still leads the whole league at his position group. He picked off a pass in 5 straight games, something nobody had done for this franchise since the merger. That defense carried the Eagles all the way to Super Bowl 57, and even though they lost to the Chiefs, you could see exactly what this guy brought to the table: the playmaking, the aggression. The way he made quarterbacks second-guess throws they normally wouldn't even think twice about. Now here's where it gets messy the first time. After that season, he wanted to get paid like a guy who just led the league in picks, and Howie Roseman wasn't ready to hand that out. So, he walks in free agency, signs a 1-year deal with the Lions for $6.5 million, and it's a disaster almost immediately. Tears his pec in week 2, misses basically the entire season, and the Lions end up making a run to the NFC Championship without him even on the field. That's gotta sting a little, right? Watching a team make a deep run while you're rehabbing and not contributing a single snap. And from what came out later, that's exactly when the relationship soured, because he felt like the organization wasn't straight with him about what his path back even looked like. So fast forward to 2024, he comes back to Philly on a 3-year deal worth $27 million, and look, he balled out. 59 tackles, 6 interceptions, 12 passes defended, a forced fumble, and that pick 6 off Cooper Rush that went 69 yards and got him NFC Defensive Player of the Week. That defense was the best in the league in EPA per play that year, and he was a massive piece of it. Eagles go and beat the Chiefs 40-22 in the Super Bowl. He's got his ring, and then almost immediately after winning it all, the Eagles move him out. That part right there is the whole story in a nutshell. 2 different stints, 2 different exits, and both times it ended with him gone not long after the production was at its best, which honestly tells you the football was never really the issue. So now we get to this interview, and honestly, I think this is the part that's got everybody fired up. He sat down and basically pushed back on the idea that he's some kind of locker room problem, said nobody was calling him that after the Super Bowl loss or after the Super Bowl win. So why is it suddenly the story now? And look, on the surface, I get the logic. The team won with him on the field, twice actually. But come on, if you're sitting there and you bounced to 7 teams in 8 seasons and you're on your 4th team in the last 15 months alone, at some point you got to ask yourself why that keeps happening to the exact same guy and not to the guys around him. Because here's what happened after the trade. The Eagles sent him to the Texans, and that lasted, 3 games before they cut him loose. And from what's being reported, it wasn't pretty. He was reportedly complaining about his role in that scheme, pushing to blitz more than they wanted him to, and at some point basically told the team he wanted out. 3 games, guys. That's not even a full month of football before the whole thing fell apart again. From there, he bounces to a practice squad stint with the Ravens, finishes out 2025 with the Bears, and now he's landed with the Bills on a 1-year deal worth $3.5 million. So in 15 months, this man has worn 4 different jerseys. 4. That's not bad luck, that's a pattern, and I think everybody watching this league knows the difference between a guy who's unlucky and a guy who's the common thread. But here's the actual headline, and I mean this is the part that's making rounds everywhere this week. In that same interview, he seemed genuinely happy talking about the Eagles roster getting broken apart. The trade that sent A.J. Brown to the Patriots, Reed Blankenship heading off to the Texans, he's out here treating that like some kind of payback for how his situation went down. And then there's the line that's really sticking with people, where he goes after Saquon Barkley directly, basically telling him he hopes he's happy now that the band's getting broken up. That's not just venting about his own career anymore, that's a guy actively rooting against the team that gave him a championship ring, talking about a roster he's still technically a part of in the history books. And a guy like Barkley who had absolutely nothing to do with how that front office handled his exit. Now look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend this guy can't play, because that would just be dishonest. The man can legitimately light up at nickel, deep safety, or free safety depending on what the defense needs. That's real versatility, and that's why teams keep taking chances on him. But his own peers voted him the most annoying player in the league and the biggest trash talker in the same anonymous poll, and that tells you something too. In Detroit, he called the whole experience hell and said he felt lied to about coming back. And in this same interview we're talking about, he didn't just take a shot at the Eagles, he went after the Lions, the Ravens, and the Texans all in one sitting. 3 different franchises, 1 interview. That's not one bad breakup, that's a trend, and at some point the common denominator stops being the teams and starts being the guy. But here's the thing, none of this actually changes much for me as an Eagles fan because the roster he's talking about is still loaded, and honestly, while I'm on the topic of the roster, there's a lot worth getting into right now. Start with Quinyon Mitchell because the front office took heat for picking him over Terrion Arnold in that draft, and with everything going on with Arnold's legal trouble since, that pick is looking even smarter in hindsight. Then you've got Jalen Hurts, and people keep calling this a prove-it year for him like he hasn't already answered that question multiple times. I think he uses that doubt as fuel. Honestly, he's done it before, and I don't expect this year to be any different. The offensive line is something I'm watching closely too. I'm not ready to call them elite again until they actually prove it on the field, but there's reason for optimism. Tyler Steen showed real growth last year, and if Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens can get back to their best, that group can be one of the better lines in the league again. And that's the kind of foundation that makes everything else on offense easier. And then there's Bryce Huff, who's been out here complaining since he left, and honestly his complaints don't really hold up when you look at it. He never really fit the scheme here, and he didn't do enough to earn a bigger role, so acting like the organization wronged him doesn't add up to me. The bigger storyline, though, is Jalen Carter's contract. I think the front office still wants him long-term, but they're being cautious about paying top dollar right now, especially with his production dipping a bit and some injury concerns lingering, and the market getting more expensive after Jeffrey Simmons signed that massive deal. That's one I'm watching closely all offseason because how that gets resolved says a lot about how this front office values its homegrown talent going forward. On the roster bubble, Ty Robinson might be in trouble making the final 53 with Byron Young seemingly ahead of him at the position. And don't be shocked if a couple surprise names make the cut, two guys like Eric Ezukanma sticking around purely for his special teams value. Or Kapina Gushiken at safety given the kind of guaranteed money he got as an undrafted free agent. As for Eli Stowers, I wouldn't panic on him yet. He's still learning the position, and the fact that he's putting in work at tight end university this offseason tells you he's serious about getting better. And that kind of self-awareness usually pays off down the line. And honestly, if you zoom out and look at that 2024 draft class, Quinyon Mitchell-Cooper, Dejon, and Jalix Hunt, that trio has a real chance to go down as one of the best draft classes this franchise has ever put together if they keep developing the way they have been. So at the end of the day, you can have a guy like Gardner-Johnson out there talking trash about a roster getting broken up, but when I look at what's actually still here and what's coming up through the pipeline, I'm not losing any sleep over it. Drop your take in the comments, let me know if you think he's just bitter or if he's got a point, and make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown.